Welcome to Jill's Nomad Survival. My name is Jill. Today we're doing part 4 in our series on planning your nomad retirement. We're focusing on family. It's a loaded topic. We're going to get into it now. This one's kind of complicated because family dynamics are a lifetime of learning in and of itself. But there's just a few things that I'm going to toss out at you to consider when you're thinking about packing up and leaving, or if you're already on the road or away or are creating a different kind of lifestyle based on this nomad principle. So one of the things that might come up, depending on what relationships we're talking about here, is there can be a sense of feeling of abandonment, of betrayal, of feeling like, why are you leaving me? You know, our societal structure has changed so much over the course of time. There's no perfect system for everybody. So we really need to do what's best for us, but that can create a lot of issues. There can be a sense of loss for them and for you. It's really a big issue as we get older, both as we are caretakers of our family members or as we move into the area of time when we may need to be taken care of, because distance and proximity is an issue. So it's not uncommon to have some emotional reactions around the announcement that you're now taking off if you're part of a tight family structure that lives close together. Other things that might come up are jealousy, resentment. The big one that I've seen come up is the fact that you're now flaky, right? You're no longer participating by the old rules. And how do I explain what you're doing to people that I know, because you're now very weird? It's a kind of, like I said, it's a very loaded topic. Probably the other really big one is you are now leaving your family responsibilities. And depending on how many siblings you have, again, as role as caretaker or the one to be taken care of, this can be really an issue in terms of how spread out the kids are, if they're thinking about how they're going to take care of you, or how spread out your siblings are about who's going to take care of the parents. So this is all a lot to I'm just tossing at you to kind of ruminate and think about. The other one that might come up is there's a sense of panic because you no longer have a fixed address. How am I going to know if you're okay? We have cell phone, we have text, but if you do this, you'll find there's some places where you don't get a signal. Your signal may drop, your phone may turn off before you can get it recharged again. I mean, there's a lot of issues around that. So those are some of the things that come up or can come up when your family members are just beginning to hear about this fabulous idea that you now have. So in response to that, there's some things that you can consider. And one of them is to really come up with a plan and to set expectations. I will be gone for XYZ, or I will be returning home to visit you in XYZ. Or you can come visit me when I get to such and such a place. So by clarifying the expectations ahead of time, that can really sort of diffuse some of the emotional reaction around this. Some people will be really happy for you. Some people, and some people not so much. It just really depends on your family situation. I think the biggest concerns that people have is, one, you know, what are you going to do? How are you going to survive? Two, you're no longer normal. You're sort of dropping out of society. And while that may be a bonus for some, not everybody in the family has the same point of view around that. Things also come up in terms of how to go and visit. You know, one of the things that I know about this new trailer that I want to move into is there's no way it's going to be able to be driven in Southern California down at the beach where the roads are this wide and there's 80 million people. So I won't be able to go back in this particular setup. So you have to think about things about where can you park, where can you get the bathroom, where can you get utilities, are you going to be able to go home in whatever vehicle you're choosing? Are you going to need to park at some place and then go visit? Are you going to be able to stay in the house? Are you going to be able to park out front? Now, obviously, this is very complex. Everybody's situation is different. But those are all things to factor into, because it's not always just going and visiting. It's also if there's an emergency and you have to get home very quickly. So those are the things that you need to think about ahead of time in order to factoring in. The reverse is also true if something happens to you. I talked a little bit about that in my A Case of Emergency video about how to set up a system so someone can find you, what you can do. But as a addition to that is this idea, if something happens to you, do you want your family called? Do you have friends that you want called? Who's going to look after your rig? Who's going to take care of your animals if you're traveling alone and you have animals? You know, what is family going to be able to come stay with you? Are they able to travel? Are you able to travel? So just really thinking out the family part helps a lot in terms of diffusing some of the feelings that might come up around that, and also to avoid some of the crises that might come up around that when something happens. The other piece of that is not just you, is the caregiving aspect. And, you know, these videos are really geared at people who are 45 to 65-ish, those over 50, and lots of stuff comes up around caregiving at some point for all of us in some way, shape, or form. Whether we end up trying to help somebody that we meet along the way, whether we go back or we have family members, it can be siblings, it can be kids. There's over 40 million caregivers in the United States right now, and that number is growing exponentially. In addition, here's one of those statistics, is that right now in 2010, we peaked on caregivers about 7 or 8 to 1. By 2030, that's reduced to 2 to 3 people available to give care to those who need it. So caregiving is going to be a huge issue moving forward, and the burden is really going to fall on family, where a lot of times we have other people kind of step in at this point in time. So in the same way that I just talked about when you need to go visit, we need to think about caretaking in terms of, can you go back for an extended period of time? Is your physical setup going to allow for that? One of the things I've been thinking about that I'm going to talk about in the future is getting some kind of cargo transit van to become sort of my covert caregiving vehicle when that time of my life comes up, because there's no way, like I just said, I can drive this thing back to where my family is. So, you know, it's a lot to think about. You know, some other things to add to that are, you know, if your family member's in a hospital, then booyah, if you have an RV that you can stay in, because you can park in that parking lot, blend right in, and they'll probably leave you alone because you're there for a very good reason. You know, when things like hospice or end-of-life issues come up, you're really going to want to be there. So thinking ahead kind of helps ease if any crises come around that. So that's a little bit about family in terms of some of the issues that come up. The second part about that is if you take your family with you. That little trailer I have that's all of, like, I think 83 living square feet and something inside, there were 7 people living in it at one time. I have no idea how that happened, 2 adults and 5 kids. But when you're talking about family, inside is a whole separate issue. And I really see it as a positive for people with young kids, because it's such a positive, amazing learning situation. There was lots of people homeschooling their kids and then going to the Alamo in Texas instead of just talking about the Alamo in Texas. So family is not a bad thing. One lady I met said when she was young and her kids were little, she was in her probably 60s when I talked to her, she said that experience of traveling with her kids was probably the best thing that she ever had done in terms of the value and the closeness of the family, what they got from that as a family unit. So just because the space is small and it's easy to be judgmental about that, it can be a really positive experience. And the flip side to that is really understanding that we still need to build in privacy and alone time. Living in such a tiny, confined space with more than just one person, it's hard with just one person. It's hard with the dog and the cat. So it's amazing how tiny the space feels when someone else comes into it versus when you're in there by yourself. So it's if I was traveling with a family members, I would definitely test run the idea before I did it full time, because not everybody is suited to that. I mean, the bathroom is tiny, it gets stinky, it's just, you know, you're on top of each other. So there's a lot of issues around that, but I do see it as a very positive experience for a lot of people. So it's not something you should shy away from if you have kids. I would not recommend 7 people in an 18-foot trailer. That is not the best idea ever, but who knows? If you can make it work, I say go for it. One of the things that I would say really about all of this is if you clarify expectations and you just put a plan into place ahead of time. I have my emergency plan. If there's a crisis, I know how to get back. And, you know, we sort of have a clarified plan about what the expectations are. But, you know, it's individual for everybody. Just more stuff to think about. This is just a small piece of what I cover in the book, How to Get Ready for Your Post-50 Life. It's really easy to assume that everything will just be okay and not plan ahead, but I tell you, life is better when you plant these seeds on the front end and not are reacting in a crisis on the back end. So again, you know, it's how I'm supporting all these videos. It's how I'm trying to plan for the next legs of the journey, which I'm excited to share with you very soon. But it's just value information that everybody needs, because as everybody gets older, the same things happen to everyone. And if you're a caretaker, then you're going to really get a lot of value from this also. So with that, thank you for spending this time with me. I will be coming up with the last two sections are support systems, social systems, and the last one will be on aging and transitioning out of your nomad lifestyle. It probably will happen at some point. So with that, thank you for spending this time with me, and we'll see you next time.